Okay, when I did the little thing about the serpents and so forth that Herodotus wrote about, it really struck a chord with a bunch of people, so I got a lot of hits. So I want to go into Herodotus deeply, because I let him fall off the page 10 years ago. I just forgot all about him, to be honest with you. I started going into all the other, what they call poets, they were deep writers. They weren't poets. Now, Herodotus wrote the Histories, and it was about conflicts between his people, the Greeks, and the Persian empires, which was barbarians to them. He's telling the story on their own civilization in conflict with another. Many people would be inclined to take sides, but Herodotus was not taking anybody's side. He wanted to say, why did these people do what they did? Why did these people do what they did? There's always reasons for both sides. So his impartiality, he didn't care. He cared, I'm sure, but he wanted to understand, let's put it that way. His impartiality led to his understanding, but it provoked some of his fellow Greeks to call him a barbarian lover. In this, he was like the great poet Homer. Herodotus innovated even further. Homer wrote his epic as if narrated by a goddess. So Homer wrote it like somebody was telling him about it. But Herodotus spoke with his own voice, saying, here's how I feel, here's what I'm telling you, here's what I saw, and he relayed his own experiences and his research, just like I'm doing. And he met the same problem I had. Okay, my wonderfully outstanding friends, they're interested in history and the reality of our actual histories. Who wrote about it? Basically, the original writers were Hesiod and Herodotus, Ovid, so forth. Now, I got off of Herodotus. I don't know why. I left him in the dust about 10 years ago, and I got onto Ovid and all these other guys. Now, I go back, though, and I realize this guy was the guy. Here's the story. Herodotus is considered the founding work of history in Western literature. It's the Histories, and this is what he wrote. It was written around 430 BC. That's almost 2,500 years ago, in classic Greek. The Histories served as a record of the ancient traditions. All right, these are ancient traditions. These are things that people had already forgotten. Politics, geography, clashes of various cultures that were known in Greece, the Western Asia, and Northern Africa at that time. Now, he's reporting all of these lost histories. Still, at 430 BC, they lost it. Now, what did they call him? They called him the father of history, and they also called him the father of all lies, because he was bringing forth the things that they had talked about. Now I have the proof. He was right. Herodotus wrote a ton about dragons and winged snakes. He wrote that ibises were useful because they killed winged snakes. Now, that's why they called him the father of all lies, and he was the father of history. Here, listen to this. Before Herodotus, accounts of important events had been the purview only of the royalty. Only the top people knew of these very important ancient events. Minstrels, priests, royalty, they're the ones that knew about it. The common people had no idea. Perhaps his innovation in relaying information was partly responsible for his reputation as the father of history. So he was telling everybody, here's our real history, and for his less flattering reputation as the father of lies. They attacked him. Well, I'm sure the father of history was realized by the average person, and the father of lies was academia, all of the Pharisees and all of the top guys. Historians of classical antiquity suspected Herodotus of passing along hearsay and perhaps even inventing takes for his own amusement. Even less damning assessment called him misguided. They tried to destroy him, let's put it that way. All right, here's mudmen. These creatures, people like us, are living inside these scales and everything, which is pretty accurate. These things were big. just where they were living inside the scales, exactly what we see today. All right, I know this is going to be almost impossible to see, but this right here is where the bone sat down. There's a saddle right here. That bone coming down from the leg sat here. This divot right here is where the fibula came down. So you have the tibia coming down here, and the foot rocks on that. Then you have the other bone coming down here that locks in on the side called the fibula. So this did have both of those. You can barely see. It's very, very hard to see. Sometimes if you move around the light, you can catch a highlight of it. That's why shadows are the best for bringing out the structures and things. But anyway, that's the best I'm going to be able to show you that. Because these were highly eroded in this flood. But this is from some kind of really oddball foot. All right, that's an oddball foot right there. I call it the Oompa Loompa. And right there is where the bone attached in the back. I mean on the side, you know, the fibula. So the tibia comes down here, the fibula comes over here. Now, this died in the flood along with all the rest of them. There was all kinds of crazy creatures. And you see that, well, I could show that in a microscope. You see that that's nothing but leather. Oh, ah. And he died like that. Oops, laying flat like that. And of course the fibula disassociated. Now the same thing here. This is nothing more than skin. That's nothing more than leather. I suppose I should show it in a microscope, which I will. You see that? That's another one. This one here, the toes are built into these. This is an oddball one. This is the only one I have like this, like a big Oompa Loompa thing in the front. This is what they normally are. It's basically like our feet. Only inside here they have springs. If you could see that, I don't know if you can or not, there's a little pin right there. And then there's springs inside. These are no toes, and they have springs instead of bones. And this one here is the same thing here. That's where the tibia sat right there. And there's a little rise in the back that keeps it from slipping off the back. It sits right in there, and then the fibula comes down here. Same thing with this one. It's exactly identical, no difference. And you see how it's all different here and a little wrinkly like there. There was, you know, you have to be able to move and stretch and do all kind of things. And these are the pads on the bottom. Hit here and hit here. Has same arch like ours, only it literally looks like it had a sole built right into it, but it isn't. That's part of the creature's body. And this is just like from one of these guys over here. You know, it's kind of oddball looking foot, as you ask me. And it's got the same thing. It's got underneath the same. This is all leather. That's just nothing but more than leather. I'll show you in a microscope in a few seconds. I'm going to warm up now. But and then of course you can see where it was laying flat there. And again, they all died in the flood. Every one I have has a flat spot. I mean, virtually every single one. And I believe that's the flat spot on this one. It died, laying in the flood, something like that. And the top just broke right off. All right, and of course even Caesar here, he's got one perfect side and one flat side. That's the way it worked in the flood. It was a hot water flood. All of these oddball creatures, I mean, I have creatures that people have sent to me, that I have some here they actually sent me, and I have, most of them are just in pictures and things, but trust me, I understand these things. I understand the textures and how these rocks were formed by body parts, and they were formed because of nucleophilic substitution in a hot salt water flood. Simple as that. And you can make them yourself. And what happens is the body parts break apart, like the feet come away, the toes come away, organs come out of the body, lungs, everything, because the flesh, the cheap stuff, the flesh boils away. Where you have heavy, thick hide, you can't get into the inside to boil it out. But where you have thin skin on your arms and your legs and your torso and so forth, it boils out and lets out the body parts. I have a lung over here. It's just like brand new. Hold on. This is a lung. Same thing. DNA tested, CAT scan, and anatomically flawless and flat as a pancake on the back. They all did that because of the Great Flood, recorded by Velikovsky. And this now needs to be taken quite serious. And these kind of things need to be taken quite serious. They were not just stories made up to scare kids. This is pretty much reality. All right, most of the mud fossils have fascia on them, which is just a coating like a membrane. It's kind of thin. Now, lungs, on the other hand, have an extremely dense, thick fascia. It's called pleura. However, that is really rubbery and stretchy, and it's very, very dense with fabric. Now, leather, on the other hand, is a little different, and I will show you in the microscope, but it still has a lot of the fibers and all that business. However, it's not quite so stretchy as your lungs, because they have to do this all the time. Now, I'm going to show you this in a microscope. I've shown the other things so many times. I probably will show you again, but anyway, let's get started. Alright, this is the leathery surface of that Oompa Loompa big one there. Now, still has some fibery stuff. This is more or less the little bloodyish stuff that's run over the top of the fibers, but it's still got all these little balls that hold it in place. I'm going to move this around a little bit, and you can see it's basically the same sort of stuff. Now, if you get off of where the black stuff is, hold on, let me see if I can focus in on this here. You're going to see the white fibery stuff. Hold on. Alright, here we go. Alright, this is really what the matrix of skin and leather is. All these little black balls and all these little white straps hold them in place. This is more or less some blood. This is the bottom surface, so the blood drained down around here. But this is the fabric. And these black balls and all these little fibers is what keeps the leather, very, very tough. Alright, here's what I want to direct you to. Is this little rise here. You see it? And you see the little rise here? That's where the main bone from your leg comes down. Same thing with this one here. And then the secondary bone comes down to the side and just locks in with a little pin. And the same thing here. They're locked in with a little pin. And that breaks right off. And then you end up with the feet. Okay. I want to speak about why I'm always showing body parts. Like this is literally a body part. I think this was either a kidney. I think it probably was a kidney, but I'm not sure. But you see, it's flat as a pancake. It was in the flood. I broke it open to see what was inside, and sure enough, it's got plenty of biology in there. Now, this is another lung, and the lungs come apart. The pleura started to deteriorate on this, and there's the actual lung. And this one here, nothing happened to it at all. It's absolutely flawless. And this was from some other kind of creature, but it's a lung. They look like rocks. You say, well, that's just a rock. No, it isn't. It was a body part. And they boiled out of these creatures. Now, this is the only one I have that is a complete body. And you say, oh, I don't see any complete body. Well, let me show you. This is the lobes of the lung. This is what's inside of here. This is what's inside there. This is like lungs. Well, this is a lung. And this is also lungs. And these are the lobes of the lung. And now it's all deteriorated away and turned into muddy, flat muddiness. Now, what would you expect to see behind the lungs? Well, you'd see, first of all, inside the lung, you want to see all these holes, which are holes down in there. Yeah, there's lungs going on in there. There's alveoli down in there. Behind that, there's the ribs and the back. And here are the backbone ribs. You see, the bones are still in there, some of them. So this is the whole section of this guy's body. He died laying like this. And then it washed away all the stuff on the surface, which was the fleshy stuff, until it got down to like a fleshy, muddy, lungy thing. And then in the back was against the mud. So it collected the blood in these muddy cavities, and some of the bone was preserved. It's very, very unusual. The bone almost never, ever. Well, let me show you something. You see that? That's a bone. That is an entire 100% bone. 100% bone. And you say, well, how come it's not white? And I said, well, yeah, it is white. And you say, well, show me the white. You see the white? There's the white right there. That's all that's left of the white that's in this bone. It transitions because it's in wet, muddy, aqueous transition metal complexes, which is blood, and it finds stability with other things and turns into basalts. I'll show you that bone in a microscope. I'll show you some of these bones and so forth. But it's pretty obvious when you understand the process. What they're doing now, and I'm not kidding you, they're taking bones, they're taking body parts and chipping away all of the good stuff and getting down to inside and finding something that looks like a bone. They say, ooh, there's a bone. There's still stones now. It's just that they can't understand. They would take Caesar. They would take my good friend Caesar here, and they'd chop everything off until they got down to like a little layer they would see that looked like a bone in there. And then they'd say, ooh, ooh, ooh. Here, let me show you something. Hold on. As you know, I have giants. Giants. Now, this is a bone right there. This is a fingertip. CAT scanned, DNA tested, the whole 9 yards. And this is the top. The fingernail was right up like this, went right around. It's quite eroded around the top. And here's the bottom, which has the same pads on the bottom you have on your fingers. All right, now I think this was a left thumb. Oh no, a right thumb. And the reason is, the bone itself is right here. They're supposed to be in the center. But on the thumbs, they're offset. And on the right thumb, it's offset and it's sitting here. Now, here's what they would do. This is flesh. All this is flesh. They would break that away and find a bone-looking thing, which is this. And then they'd start chiseling everything else until they found the pattern of the bone, which you can see in a CAT scan. It's not real easily to see. But you see what they're coming up with now. It's just crazy. They're chiseling away at all the good stuff. So anyway, that's this is the only one I really have that is a complete body. Normally, that lung would have boiled out of there. I don't know why it didn't do it on this one. This is the back, and there's the lungs. And that would have been right at the top of the lung. You can still see some red blood that's in here. We'll look at it in a microscope, put a little water on it. And that's the way the guy would have stood up like this. And that's his back. And the only reason these bones are still preserved at all is because it was laying in the mud upside down like that. Bones do not last, as you will see. Alright, I said there's just a tiny little taste of bone left. This is it right here that I was pointing to, this white spot. And I may have been wrong. That may not even be bone. We're going to look at it real close in the microscope. It could be a blood vessel now that I look at it. After all these years, I'm telling you, every day I find something new. Now, it's going to be sitting right at the step of this edge here. So we're going to see a step and then that little spot right next to it, which I thought was bone. And it could, here's the microscope up here, so we're looking down at it. All right, now here it is up here. I got to turn the lights off. Hold on. Okay, my friends, the things I have been showing for years and years now are about the giant creatures that inhabited our Earth long ago. They were all recorded by virtually every culture in history. Dragons, giants, monsters, catastrophes, at least one very bad flood. And Velikovsky says there was two. The first one was 1500 BC, the second one was 800 BC. These were recent ones. There was probably more before that, I don't know. But I could tell you one thing, my mud fossils are a product of these floods. And this is from Pink Floyd. And this is 1972, and this is virtually exactly what I've been showing. People and everything there is on the face of the earth are living in these folds of these creatures' bodies, in their scales and everything. It's just, they knew this in 1972. You should watch this video. It's called Mud Men. Now, like I say, Pink Floyd, one of my favoriteest groups in history, because they also wrote about we don't need no thought control. Just another brick in the wall. And that's what they've been doing, is thought controlling us for a very long time, since the age of de-enlightenment to destruction of intelligence. What's the age of enlightenment? You say what we tell you to say, or you're stupid. Now, this is what they're showing, and people living, like tiny people, like the size of a flea living on these. Well, let me tell you something. That's fine. But this creature here would be the size of the entire North Africa, which I have shown. That's how big these creatures were. I cannot account for it. I don't know what they ate. I don't know any of that stuff. I do know that they were written about, and nobody could ever have guessed the sizes that we're talking about. See, this is very, very good. Pink Floyd, Mud Men from 1972. Think Floyd 61. That's where it is, and it's good. I don't think there's any commercials. All right, this is more Pink Floyd, another brick in the wall, and this is right on target. You should watch this. Pink Floyd, another brick in the wall, on YouTube. Very good vid. All in all, you're just another brick in the wall. We don't need no thought control. And that's what it is right now. If you speak up against your professors, they will destroy your life. Simple as that. Okay, you may have heard of the Nagas, which are the snakes. And I mean, they're there. There's no question they're there. And they are petrified, and they are in like viper dens, basically. There's a whole ton of them in Thailand. And they were everywhere around the world. But I got to tell you something. It sounds crazy, but these things are tiny. These are just little tiny things. I showed you Pink Floyd with a gigantic thing and the people living in the scales and everything. There's no good people going to be living in these scales. These, I think, these kind of things and all of the extreme crazy sea serpents and everything are the things that were living inside, probably in the blood and on and around these big gigantic creatures. These are just tiny little things, but they had to be living somewhere, and then they died, and this was after the flood. So all of these giant creatures died. Now all of the creatures that were living on them and in them had to go somewhere. They were protected, most of them, that were inside of these creatures, because they were deep inside in the bodies, and that took a long time to cause any trouble, and they actually drained out into the ocean. I'll show you where they drain out into the ocean, and these are the kind of things that did. They call them extremophiles now, and they were at that time called sea serpents. Here's another one right here. This is Bahram killing the dragon. They all wanted to kill these dragons. The dragons were eating people, and this is painted in 1370. Here's Quetzalcoatl, a gigantic creature, runs all the way from the Gulf Coast here in the United States all the way up to Canada. And his just feathers coming off the top of his head. And they ate people too. These were all written about by the indigenous peoples that were here. You see that? That's the United States. This is the Gulf, and it goes all the way up to Canada. Quetzalcoatl. Now, I can't account for the size of these creatures, but I can tell you that creature is there. And of that, there is no question. Zero. The reason this color is the color that it is because of the scales or the whatever it was on this dragon. Now, he did have feathers, really feathery feathers, that created a lot of green, because feathers make very, very green substances. Now, this is his head. That's his beard. They all had a beard. You saw it on the other thing. Go back and look again if you missed it. And here's his feathers sticking straight up the top, as you saw on the other one. And they run all the way around the back of his head, basically, all the way across the top of his head are the feathers. Now, so there's his bonnet of feathers. There's his head. It runs all the way down. Follow my cursor. Well, let me do it this way. I got a feather too. Runs all the way down here. This is his belly, running all the way up the East Coast, all the way to Canada. Now, follow this. This is his winged feathers. Shoulder, probably. It comes up, and his wings come up all the way up. These are all feathers, 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 feathers. See, all the way to the tip. You see that running? It's a continuous thing. Now, can I show you feathers? Absolutely I can. Would you like to see feathers? Yes, I would. Okay, no problem. Here they are right there, my good feather-asking friends. Now, why do feathers grow so green? Well, because they make actually feather meal, it's called, to green plants, to make them greener. Well, why would it do that, Roger? Well, it's because it has an extreme amount of nitrogen, and it's a slow-release nitrogen, continuously releasing nitrogen. Whoa, big deal. Why does that make them green? Well, chlorophyll, which is the part in the plant that receives the light and turns it into power and energy to grow, is green. And the greener it is, the better it absorbs the light. So the more nitrogen that is regulated correctly over long periods of time will create more and more chlorophyll to just continuously stay nice and bright green. You got bright green, they could grow like crazy. And that's feathers. So that's why you have the Green Mountains. I'm telling you, that's just what it is. Here he is. All the way up the East Coast. You see it? All the way up to the Green Mountains. And he's only one. The other one is the one over here. This I show all the time too. And this runs the entire top of North Africa. How they got this big, je ne sais pas. It's a little French for it. It means I have no freaking clue. This is a fish. Take your time. Come up yourself. I've done this 10,000 times now. Here's the dragon all the way down across North Africa. Here's his legs here. His body is all over here. Here's his tail. All the way out to the end. That is the dragon. Now, Herodotus was only talking about little puppy things. Feathered serpents and winged serpents. But he said they were everywhere. He said they were just literally everywhere. There's so many of them, he said, that people could not possibly survive, except for the fact that the way they gave birth, the female would kill the male, and then, according to him, the baby would eat its way out of the mother's womb and kill the mother when it was born. So it was always going to be a dwindling population from bazillions of them. He said they were everywhere, just literally everywhere. You couldn't hardly walk without bumping into one. All right, I'm going to show you some text written by Apollodorus in 180 BC talking about this dragon that is in North Africa called Typhon. Now, it's not, it's actually very easy to see, but, you know, I missed it forever until I finally realized what it was. His head starts up here, goes all the way down to the other side of North Africa. And I'll show you this in extremely good details in a second. According to Apollodorus, Typhon was a monster, and he was so big that his head would brush the stars. His head would brush the stars, and there's no question that's true, because this is over 1,000 miles long. Now, he had thighs, and it's specifically spoken of. His thighs looked like human thighs, and then coming out of them there was coils of a viper. And that's what's shown in the old ancient pottery and all kinds of stuff. And this is his body. And I'll show you the scales. And they had feathers, they had all kinds of stuff. And every one of them that I have found has what's called a cloaca, which means it's an avian creature. A cloaca means in a normal human being you have a penis and an anus and you poop and you pee. These guys, everything comes together and it flushes all out in one thing. Just like you see bird poop on your window, it's black and white together. Well, that's because everything went together and squished out of there. That's called a cloaca. Now, and this has one I can show you. And people live in the poop there because it's very fertile there. And they live also where blood is, because that also is extremely fertile. Those are the two things that are very, very fertile. And then any of your red, well, we'll get into that later. So, but anyway, I'm going to show you this up close. But like I said, Apollodorus says his head would brush the stars, and he had coils of a viper and legs, thighs, specifically he said thighs of a human. Now, I'm going to wipe this off and we're going to look at this. All right, so don't forget, here's his head. Here he is, all across North Africa. All right, so let's go looking at his head. All right, you saw where I said his head was. There's his head right there. All right, you see it? That's his head. It comes down here. He's spitting all this stuff out of here, attacking another creature. We shall see that in a minute. And this is his neck that runs all the way down. This is the flashy stuff they have on in the parades in China and Asia and all that. Here's his red, flared, flashing eye. You see how it flares back? And this is also exactly what Apollodorus says. His red, flared eye, his gigantic body. Now, all of this from here down is decaying runoff in the desert, which is body fluids. And that's why you see black and red, because that's the different blood. Now, don't forget, here he comes down. He's got a very long neck, and it was gashed and cut. So here's his neck. Here's the actual throat where he swallows people. All right, now, this is his armored protection right here. It comes out to about here. That's where it stops. All of this is just runoff of body fluids that are running off of his dead body. This is that flashy stuff that goes down the sides of all the creatures. And again, these are his plates of armor. Now, you see they're hinged. And when I say hinged, cut, a cut, a cut, a cut, everywhere so he can move his neck. Otherwise, if it were one big solid thing, there's no moving. You see, and it comes down, and they all have those hinges here and there. And that's why you see the runoff in between the hinges. You see it? Runoff, 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 runoff. That's where the hinge is. Okay? And those are dragon scales. I mean, if you can't see that is not a mountain. And this river basin here is not just a river basin, it's his throat. All right, now, right here is where his throat was cut. Now, remember I told you about the red feathers? I mean, the green from feathers? This is where his throat was gashed, right here. You see it? With a great and mighty sword, they said. That's what the ancient texts say. That's not my words. And his throat was gashed with a great and mighty sword, and his red blood ran out all throughout here, creating extreme amounts of greenness in the desert. You ever seen anything like that? The reason is because that is red blood running out from a dead, decaying creature. And it still seems to be doing it. You see this? This is all the red stuff running out of here. I mean, well, it's the red blood, which makes the waters in this area turn extremely green. That's just the way it is. And they always say, oh, that's just some kind of algae. I say, yes, this is the kind of algae that lives off of blood. All right, so now, here we go. Zoom way down into his gut. These are his guts. Over here are his thighs. And the thighs come down to here, and then they turn into, you really can't see it well, but they come down and then they turn into these coils that come over here. I'll show you in a minute. Very hard to see those. As a matter of fact, I really can't show you them with any certainty. But I can tell you, out here, there's no question that is a leathery fabric. And that's what I would expect. I don't know why it had this gotten away, but this is where, well, let me show you now. Might as well show you we're talking about it. You see that? That is not just sand dunes. Now, if you know anybody that's ever worked with leather, ask them what that is. Just ask them. Say, have you ever seen anything like that before? Have you ever looked at leather in a microscope? I have. And that's it. All right, now, how it got way out here and obstructed over here, I don't know. Something got in the way, whatever this is. But anyway, something's coming right out of there. It's covering this up somehow. But anyway, these are his viper coiled legs. They said they ran forever, all the way across and he has one going this way too. Now, I told you the avian creature. Here's what poop works on it's coming right out of here. All right, this right here is one of the poop ducts. Right here, coming down here, you see it? Doom, 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 doom. It comes out and it poops right into here. Now, where's the other part? It's right here. This is, you ever see them? They're white and then black. Well, here's the black one, and here's the white one, and then they meet right up together here. Right here, and they mix together, and they poop right out from there. The little flap is open. And these people are living here because it's very fertile. It's fertilizer, and fertilizer is made out of, poop is very, very good fertilizer. And blood is excellent fertilizer. And bone meal is excellent fertilizer as well. The blood and feather meal is used to grow big, quick, fast green. And then bone meal is the calcium side. Works into flowering. That's what. So there's the growing phase and the flowering phase. And anyway, this comes out and poops right out of there. See it? And it runs down to here. So anyway, this is an avian creature, and it was attacking this creature right here, which is a fish. Now, I'm not going to get crazy with this guy, because so many times you have to go back and look. If you want to find out the details, come up here yourself or go back and look. But this creature here is a dragon. I believe I've shown that quite convincingly. This is his beards that come down. They all have them. You saw Quetzalcoatl has his. That's where they shoot the venom from. You see this? That's shooting venom out of that beard. Look at this stuff. That's coming out of his beard. And I never knew that. I thought they came right out of the throat, but it appears it's coming out of his beard. And it came down here and hit the fin and then ate up his vital flesh down to here. All right, it hit the fin and that all burnt up. But down here you have meat. And meat has to be serviced with blood. And blood requires arteries. And arteries require, just like this. And then the arteries turn into blood vessels. And these little blood vessel tubes feed all the blood cells that are in the area with all the different nutrition and so forth. And then you have these black seams here, which are returned. This is after all the oxygen and so forth is used up from it. The black ones pull blood back into your heart to be recycled. This is biology right here, opened up, just like you did an autopsy on a fish. And here's his fin, his scales. The eyeball is right up there. This, I don't know what that is. But if you took this out of the picture, that's his eyeball. In my opinion, these are the scales. They go like this way. That way he swims this way, the water go over the top of him. So he's not going that way, he's going this way. And this is the tail right out here. That's the top fin. He's got a little fin on the bottom. And he's being attacked by this fish. They show these in the ancient Greek coins. They show the fish and the dragon in a fight. I have several different ones. I show pictures of them. And so this was not unknown. And even on the maps, they show the dragon with his throat cut. And that was from 1375, I think. Okay, I told you about Apollodorus. Here it is right here. He wrote in, I think it was 180 BC. And he's talking about the earth and the titans and all these things, these gigantic monsters and terrible aspect, long locks drooping from their heads and chins, scales and dragons for feet. I mean, it goes on. This is just absolutely stunning what it talks about. Let's get right down to Typhon. All right, when the gods had overcome the giants, and I'm talking the giants, Earth, still more enraged, Earth itself had intercourse with Tartarus, which is hell, and brought forth Typhon, which is that giant monster that's in the desert. Now, it was a hybrid between man and beast in size and strength that surpassed all the offspring of Earth. His thighs, remember I showed you the thighs? It was of human shape and such prodigious bulk that he outtopped all the mountains, and his head often brushed the stars. All right, and he's talking about his hands reach way out to the west and other to the east. Those are the leather things I'm talking about. From the thighs downward, well, maybe not that part, but from the thighs downward, he had huge coils of vipers, which when drawn out reached to his very head and emitted a loud hissing. His body was all winged, and you can see it. Go back and look at him. Unkempt hair streaming on the wind from his head and cheeks. Fire flashed from his eyes, as I showed you. Such was Typhon when so great was Typhon when hurling kindled fired rocks. He made for the very heaven with hissing and shouts, spouting a great jet of fire from his mouth, as I showed. When the gods saw him rushing at heaven, they made for Egypt in flight, and being pursued, they changed their forms into those of animals. This is just crazy. Zeus pelted Typhon, and at a distance cut him with thunderbolts, and close quarters struck him down with a sickle. And then it goes on and on and on and on. But this is all about Hercules and Hera and Zeus and Hephaestus, Mimas, who is a moon, Enceladus, Poseidon, Hermes. I mean, Hercules, this is what the ancient myths said. And this is the most spectacular one of all, and that one there is true. So what are you going to say? All the rest of them are just nonsense? Don't forget, that's Quetzalcoatl. See his beard? There's his beard right there. They all had, well, I don't know all of them, but these guys had him. See the beard? And this is his plumes, and I mean, I've shown that one pretty good too. All right, this is that little white spot. I don't know whether it's bone or tendon, but I think it's got to be one or the other. You see these little dots in these fibers now, whether that's bone tissue, I don't know, that's completely disintegrated around it and transitioned, and this is what's left, possibly, or this is a tendon, and that is the core of the tendon, and it runs down like a fiber to somewhere else from that bone. Normally the tendons would be outside the bone, so I can't go with a tendon there either. Okay, I'm pretty sure I showed you this lung, which is the guy's back, really. This is his chest, and this is his back. And we're going to be looking at both sides in a second. And then we're actually going to be looking at the lung, lobes of the lung on the side and all that. So we're going to start with this side, which is the lobes of the lung. And this is another lung that's here that eroded in a different manner, and the pleura is half eroded, and you still have this part of the lung, which is where the alveoli is, down there. And then this is the pleura, which is that stuff. This one's completely eroded down to the alveoli. This hasn't eroded whatsoever. It's absolutely flawless. And this one is halfway in between. They're all flat, and they boiled out of creatures' bodies. This specific area that I am in is very unusual. They all, I mean, they're just laying everywhere. They're everywhere. I didn't have to dig for these. They're just laying there everywhere. And there's his feathers. Now, I pretty much figured out the process, nucleophilic substitution, and then some form of a evacuation of the area with clean, non-salty, non-acid, watery runoff. And it evacuated them from all the destructive chemistry and left what's called feldspar. And that feldspar is a coating that wraps, even like this goose's head. Now, this goose is perfect on this side. There's his feathers. Now, the reason feldspar forms is it forms on collagen and keratins. Now, inside is the bloody stuff and bones and everything, and that turns into basalts, limestone, that kind of stuff. But the outside is always, always, always feldspar, unless it erodes, which is the feldspar is the collagens and the membranes. This had all its collagens and membranes on it as it drained off and hardened up. This got flushed off. This got halfway flushed off. But the bottoms are where you can find the best stuff to look at because it's preserved it. Even like this. This one here, this is the top. You can see how it's all running like water ran over it, which it did. The bottom has preserved the bones. Almost never, well, when I say preserve the bones, there's a few in here that we'll be able to see. I don't know if you can see that. There's a batch of them in there that are from the ribs and so forth. Well, from the backbones where the ribs wrapped up around. Now, we'll be looking at all this in a microscope. But my point is that it all depends on the conditions that they were in, how well they preserved. In this particular area, they just preserved perfectly, absolutely flawlessly. And some of them, it was just like a piece of meat, chunk of meat. Bones, but they all basically turned to stones. Now this turned to stone, but it looks like a piece of meat. It really didn't change color or anything. Now, that's kind of an unusual circumstance. That's a very unusual circumstance. This would almost be what you would call an opal. All right, opals are transition metals that stabilize, and the transition metal here is iron. So maybe that's an opal piece of meat. Okay, there's the lung in the microscope. Now we're going to be looking at it up above here. You see all the little alveoli holes? See them everywhere. I'm going to change the lighting. We're going to play around with the lights a little bit. You see the different colors in there? The red that's down in there? Hold on. You see that down in there? That's blood. That's blood over there. You see it? Now again, this is dry. This is absolutely bone dry. Well, it's lung dry actually. Let's put a little bit of water on there. Now I'm going to let that soak in, and this is only going to take a second or two. I mean, really very, very quick. Okay, now. See it sucking it right up? When you get too much light, you can't really see the contrast. You need to bring the light down so that you don't get so much reflectivity that it obscures your vision. That's the beauty of these telescoping microscopes. I can bring that down to almost nothing. Sometimes I can bring it down to where I can actually see only metals. You see that? How cool that is. And reflectivity is, well, it's a sign of the molecular makeup of the thing. You see all these here? I can get down to a point where almost the only thing that shows up is these. And now it's just shut off. But right, see, now, what are we looking at? These red things, I don't know what they are. But it's probably some kind of blood. So then I go in and I look at it deeper and I say, what is that stuff? It's all the same color. It's in an area here. Sometimes you can see a real focus of an area. All right, so that's the lung side. Now let's go to the back and see if we can find a bone to look at. And there's one right there. Now, that is exactly what ribs look like. They have these little dimples in them, and that's just a chunk of bone. Now again, that is unusual. That's unusual. Here's some more bone. Very rare that those are preserved. And the only reason is it was upside down laying on that in the mud. Otherwise you just don't get bone. Alright, so that's about as good as you're going to get in a mud fossil for bone. Alright, check this out. Now, I've been always talking about lungs, like I show there's a crystal in this lung here that's developing that is actually turning into a quartz crystal. Well, this also has some of the crystals in it, and they form in what they call vugs. Vugs are nothing more than holes that are in lungs. Their vugs are holes, and I showed you all those holes that are in the lungs. Now let's see what we can see coming down the side into the lung cavity here. All right, we're in the microscope again up here. All right, get ready. Okay, this is in one of these vugs, and it's starting to form a crystal, and that's going to be, I don't know, a sapphire or something like that. And it'll take on the same color depending upon how much water will flow through there, and if the stuff that it wants to attach to is available, it'll take it on. It's called nucleophilic substitution. You have some that want to attach and some that want to leave, and that's what happens. And they take on their own kind and grow crystals. You know, there's imperfections in them. There's all kind, and that's why the very clear crystals are so desirous, because there's no imperfections. This is going to have a lot of crap in the middle of it, but it'll still have a lot of crystal. Alright, we're going to let that water sink in right there. I just squirted a little water on it. There's where our crystal is. Now, let's see if we turn up the light, if anything is better. Or, well, you can see it blue. And that's going to grow. That'll grow. And you see the little white fibers on it? All of that stuff is still here. Whoops, Let me scrub this a second. Hold on 1 second, let me wipe this down. Dry it up a smidge. Alright, there it is. There's our crystal that would continuously grow. And you see what it's growing on? Blood. That's why it will transition into more and more crystal depending upon how much blood it can react with. That's what it needs, is blood. Whoops. That's what it needs to grow its crystal. And it needs to be in an aqueous solution. It's called transition metal, aqueous solution, nucleophilic substitution. That's a mouthful. In process, my friend. You see his blood? That's the guy's lung. That's the guy's lung right there. Look, here's where we're looking at right there. The side of his lung, remember? We turn the big lights on. All right? They're saturated with these body fluids. And then the crystals grow. We could probably find other ones. I could show you one that's growing in this one. It's totally crystal. Hold on. This is better than I had hoped for. This is that lung. And I'm pointing down into one of the cavities there. And that cavity is just starting to form crystals. And here it is. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? There's the crystals. Just starting to form in that little spot. Now, why it started in that exact spot, I don't know. I'm not sure. But there was probably a cavity there. That's what I usually find. All right, you see the blood around it and everything. Isn't this cool, the way this scope, I can bring up all these colors with the different intensities of light. Anyway, this is how these crystals form. And they can be completely clear, and they can be all kind of different colors. It depends on the transition metals that are available and how easily they can move through. You see that lung right there? That one there is 100% filled with those quartz. It filled 100%. 100%. You see that? These were all those open holes that I showed you in this other lung that's up in the scope here. Alright, those are open. They filled in completely and took over everything that lung had to offer. And that is a complete nucleophilic substitution of what was originally there. Look at that. I just found this today. This is on that lung. It's coming out of that hole, whatever it is. There's another little green spot somewhere around here too. But that's it. There it is right there. I can see it's coming out of something there. Hold on. I'm doing this freehand and it's tough to get it stabilized. It looks to me like it leaked out of that little dot right there. You see it coming down and leaked to there? This is obviously a little tiny hole. What the hell is that? I'd like to know what that chemistry is. And then of course you got all the blood chemistry. The blood is saturated in here. That green is from a transition metal. Now, why it collected like that in one little spot, I have no idea. But I've shown this, well, let me just show you quickly the transition metals, and then I got to stop for today. It's been running way, way, way long. And I hopefully have shown you enough to make you understand that this is no joke. This is absolute reality. And it's time to take this seriously and think about it. Because it has consequences other than just being, fabulously exciting, which to me it is. And I see that in a lot of people. And some people couldn't care less. That's fine. I don't care. It's up to you. You want to see it? That's fine. But I don't think it should be hidden and said, oh, don't look at that because it's going to break your mind or something. No, your mind is broken now. If you can just look at this and say, I don't want to see it, then your mind's broken. I suppose that's my last word. Thank you. I love you. All right, I'm always talking about the transition metals. Here's where they are. And one of those is, one of these colors came out of that lung. Something in that lung. Now, what it came out of, I don't know. Maybe we could figure that out. These are all mysteries that they just keep building on themselves. It's the rabbit hole effect, right? I love you again. All right, well, I'm going to get deep, deep, deep into this. So tell your friends to get involved with you and start paying attention with you. Get together, sit around, watch this thing and discuss it. And say, well, that guy's crazy. Or say, well, maybe there's something going on here. I don't care what you say, as long as you see it. And then you can make up your own determination. But not to be able to see these things is just not right. And that's what I'm being pushed back against very, very hard. So that I've been blocked in most areas, and I am restricted in other areas. So it's rare that I get anybody that hears from me. That's my opinion. Now maybe they're hearing from me and they're just not returning my stuff, and that's probably also quite obviously happening. But between the two of them, I'm just unheard. Other than the people like yourself that have been paying attention and find it interesting. Other people, they don't want to talk about it because they get bullied. Most of the people I work with that I know that are into this can stand up for themselves, but very few people can. I mean, I'm not kidding you. You go against the tide and they will just drown you. So stand up for yourself. Maybe get, what do they call those, one of those aqua lungs.